I'm joined by Westmeath footballer Ray Connellan to talk about the weekend's action. And obviously, you were playing for Westmeath against Dublin, 22 points to 11 to Dublin for a finish. We'll start off with actually that unbelievable point you scored out from the left flank, going towards the 14, and you cut across a banana shot. Did you fancy yourself
Yeah.
to take it on, or were there just no options?
Uh, I actually had heard someone from the side. I actually don't know if it was Westmeath voice. Someone just said about time was kind of up, like, and we'd held the ball at that stage for maybe 2 minutes, like. So I was like, I don't think I could afford to go back either way. So I've done it. I've had a couple where I've swung from a tight angle on the outside and left, so I don't mind it. So I kind of just said, look, nothing to lose here. We might as well just have a pot shot and see if it comes off. And luckily it did now. But I'm getting slided by everyone about taking about 20 steps or something first. But there's actually I hopped the ball in between. I just don't think anyone saw it. So just clear that up now that I didn't revert back to Australian ways and just start running with it.
Your other score wasn't too bad either, but can I just ask you, what was it like to play against Dublin, or actually even the week leading into it, Jack Cooney's preparations, that type of thing? How do you try and set yourself up to play against this Dublin team?
Well, the week leading in, I suppose, is all about kind of building clarity around what you want to do and what the team has to do, I suppose, to try and get a performance. The result is probably something that you worry about secondary. It's more about building clarity around goals and small kind of attainable goals throughout the game, so that you don't look at the big picture and think, well, we need to go out there and get a win, because you can get lost in that very easily in the game. So just building into the game, Jack would have highlighted some key kind of areas where we needed to be strong, and other areas where we could maybe exploit them or find weaknesses. So you do all that prep early in the week. Tuesday is probably an intense enough session where you're working on those things, but at a higher intensity level. And then for the rest of the week, it kind of dials down into, I suppose, fine-tuning maybe set plays around perhaps kickouts, or working on their kickouts or how they set up. So you try and replicate, you look at videos of their games, and you try and replicate how they set up in training. And then you'll try and bring that into your training sessions, just to try and get yourself some sort of familiarity with, I suppose, what you might be facing into. But I think Jack was very much with the water breaks now, you can break the game into quarters a lot easier. And our first goal was just get to the first water break, try and keep it within touching distance, keep things tight. And then, if things are okay there, you can maybe start to be a bit more expansive in how you go after them. But I suppose with Dublin, they're so strong that like even that first goal of trying to keep them in touch is actually quite difficult.
And when they were showing some of the footage or doing some of the analysis on the Sunday game, they were showing, Connellan in his own half, Kieran Kilkenny in his own half. Yeah. And when you talk about the structure that they have, is it fluidity, or do you think that there's a real kind of system to how they set up, that if one person goes back down the field, other players are filling other areas? Is there something kind of discernible there?
Yeah, they're very cohesive, and they're very well drilled in how they, I suppose, delegate roles and workload. They're very good at kind of pushing and pulling players based on what that player has just done. So you see if someone has made like a decent kind of 80-meter effort and finds himself in one half the field, they're quite interchangeable in where players can fit into their positions. And you saw that with on the Sunday game, where you got Con and Dean Rock coming the whole way back down the field, working as defenders, and all teams do that, and all teams have that work rate, but it's their ability then to kind of rebound from that position where they get maybe their wing backs then will bomb forward, and Con and Dean and these guys will then slowly get their way back up the field. So they're just very good at kind of pushing and pulling their players into kind of positions where they're needed, and not having the same guy, I suppose, constantly doing this kind of the doggy work and running up and down kind of thing. So they are very well drilled in it, and it's something that you notice towards the end of games when they finish quite strongly, is because they've been, not that they're conservative with their energy, but they're just efficient in how they work, and no one really ends up too gassed.
Yeah. Is it a case that you can target certain key players? I mean, Kieran Kilkenny scored 5 points from play, and feels like he's evolving as a player. Seems to be producing more scores. In the past, it was almost like he'd get the ball and sort of cycle out around the field and maybe hand pass it to someone and move it on. But he seems to have far more production at the end of it now. But like, can you target specific players, or like you were saying with the fact that they all switch around and do different roles and share it? Like, can you do that?
Yeah, I think individually there are players that can be kind of targeted. Like obviously they are very good, but like I would say in their backline 1-on-1, like there's a lot of their players, you know, you could go at them and you might get some joy 1-on-1, but it's the amount of times those players are found 1-on-1 is so rare, because they're so good. Like everyone said, like everyone says how like northern teams in Donegal, how they started this kind of like everyone behind the ball thing. Like Dublin are no different. Like if you look at Dublin playing us, like, they didn't take any chances in terms of not bringing men back. Like oftentimes the middle of the ground is full of kind of 10 or 11 players, so they're very tough to get 1-on-1. I think if you win the ball in midfield and you can go quickly, Dublin leave a bit of space there, and that's when you can get those 1-on-1s and you can take them on and you could get joy. I think it's one thing maybe we didn't. Well, to be honest, we probably didn't win enough primary ball in midfield to exploit it. But if you can be dominant around the middle in some aspect, either breaking ball or clean kickouts, and you can then get the ball forward, I think that is an area where if you get 1-on-1 with the defenders, they do leave it quite open, because they do need time to filter back into their defensive shape. But as you said about Kilkenny, like Kieran, as you said years ago, he used to maybe get 30 or 40 possessions in a game, and if you were to look at his meters made, I'd imagine they'd be like probably not as high as others, because he was that player that came out and held the ball and controlled things. But I think now he's making far more kind of incisive runs. He's obviously such a strong guy that when he does run through, he's hard to stop, and he's just putting himself into positions where he's now at the kind of the receiving end of some of these passes where he can put them over, and he's obviously so skilled on both sides too that anywhere inside the 20-meter lines or inside the 45-meter line, he's quite dangerous.
Yeah, you did a piece with Frank Roach last week, and you were talking about what it was like to play against Dublin in 2015. And just to read out a couple of your quotes, he said, "I went out to play and I had James McCarthy follow me around, literally. I remember getting a ball back in the half-back line, hand passing to our cornerback, turning to run and just being met by James. And that happened over and over and over again. Every time I got the ball, James McCarthy was there. Like by far the toughest opponent I've ever come across, just relentless, and that's the way they all are." Has it changed at all?
Not particularly. I think for me, I was a half forward there, and it would have been easier for James to stick on me. Whereas as a midfielder this week, you do get a little bit more freedom in the midfield, and you can kind of control where you go a little bit more. So I didn't feel the constant pressure of, even when you didn't have the ball, there's someone on you. But when you do get the ball, I made a couple of runs a few times, and you can hear there's 3 or 4 men running after you, and like you can hear their footsteps, you can hear them talking, and it's whether they're getting close to you or not, it's almost they build a perceived pressure where they force you into making errors just because you're so used to when you get it. 3 men crowd you and getting you almost get the jitters a little bit, and I think that sneaks into teams. So then you do notice that once you get the ball, then you're expecting pressure, and I think it's where mistakes come from then, from that kind of perceived pressure.
Do you think they're more tactically evolved than other teams, or do they just have better players? Because I'm thinking about stuff like, you know, the way you'd see Johnny Cooper hold the arm up, which is basically telling people, I suppose, we're going to hold the ball for a minute or something like that. Maybe it's a set move, setting traps so that when you try and carry the ball that you're going into traffic. Are they more evolved than other teams tactically?
Their ideas are quite similar from what I've seen. The trap is a big one, and you hear that particularly with no crowd. Actually, you could hear quite clearly over the television broadcast that when you're carrying into areas, say between maybe the 45 and the end line going towards the sideline, you'll hear the call a trap, and you know that they're trying to set numbers there so that they close the pitch in and make it narrow. And they close off kind of 2/3 of the field. So a lot of teams do that. Most teams try to do that, but I think it's the the level at which they perform these kind of tactics is far beyond where other teams are at the minute, and I think that's just I suppose a credit to the level of professionalism there, and the time that they're able to afford to it. That they are very good at the kind of the plans they've set out. They execute them really well, and they're very they're just so professional, and I suppose their offense and defense, like they're just very good at setting these traps, and no one really makes a mistake to hinder it.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, Dublin gave Westmeath a very heavy beat, and I think it was to the tune of maybe 30 points, and like they were winning games in Leinster by an average of maybe 20 points in the last few years. You lost by 11, but do you feel like they're further away from you than they were before? Are you closing the gap? Do you feel you should have been closer in this game?
Yeah, no, I think the scoreline. The scoreline probably reflects the game quite reasonably fair. I think we did create a couple of goal chances towards the end. James Dolan was arguably fouled, or we just made a few strong runners come through the middle, and like on another day they could have been in the back of the net, which would have maybe flattered the scoreline a little bit for us and let us come out of it, I suppose, with our heads a little bit higher. But I do think Westmeath, that we are closing the gap on the teams who would be perceived to be above us. Since Jack is coming, year on year we seem to have improved, and the performances have gotten more consistent. Our good with Westmeath is quite good, but our bad has notoriously been very poor. And I think we're narrowing that gap so that our bad games aren't as poor as that, and that if we are poor in a game, it's only for a shorter period of time. So I think we are closing the gap, and we've got miles and miles to go before we're ever near the level of where Dublin are, which is just the reality of it. But I do think from Westmeath's point of view, we arguably could have had that game closer. I think we were good defensively. Dublin, as you say, have had such high winning margins in Leinster over recent years. We didn't really give up any goal chances, whether that was through their lack of I suppose did they really go for goals? Maybe not. They were happy to take their points, but I think from that point of view, that's something that Dublin would have done a couple of years ago a lot more. They would have been a lot more clinical in terms of goal chance take it kind of thing.
And they've had a decent player turnover in the last couple of years, and even in this game people wouldn't have seen Tom Lahav before Robbie McDade. I think that was his championship debut. Sean Bugler started. He obviously was there before. Paddy Small probably hasn't played all that many games championship. Is there a sense that they're probably not quite at the same level they were during the 5 in a row?
Maybe, but you also have to look at who they didn't have playing the other day as well. Paul Mannion didn't start, Philly McMahon didn't start. There's two players alone that are in themselves the winning of a game. The young guys that came in, not that everyone knows who Paddy Small is now, but in terms of county football, he's not around for a very long time, and every time he got the ball he looked to do something with it. Yeah. He was very kind of aggressive, and when he had it, he's such a strong, powerful runner. I played against Paddy in colleges football this year, and he is a step above nearly every other forward in the country at this stage with how strong and aggressive he is. These guys are only going to get better. They're still having in midfield. He's only, how old is he? He's quite young. And he's already quite a big, strong guy, and he's going to develop more over the next couple of years. So I think maybe they're still a little bit off what they would have been 3 or 4 years ago, but I would say they've got a pool of talent that no one in the country really has. So will it affect them as much as the same turnover would affect the likes of Kerry or another Division 1 team? I don't think so. I think they're still very much in the driving seat in terms of All Ireland. Yeah,
and in terms of the players they brought on off the bench against you, Brian Howard, Cormac Costello, Davy Byrne, Aaron Byrne, Eric Lowndes, so they obviously have any amount of finishers. Are you happy enough, in your season overall, fourth in Division 2, won 3 games, drew 1, then obviously that performance, do you think you're moving in the right direction?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this year overall, if you're to look at it, is a positive. I I spoke with Jack once the break came in COVID, and here to go back through all of our games in Division 2, we should have beaten Armagh. I'll hold my hands up. I missed a mark from 35 yards out to win that game. We ended up drawing. We were the one game that really, like, the Roscommon game was our poorest performance. That was just, I don't know, it was just one of those days, just an off day. But like, we played some of the best football I've seen from Westmeath side in my time against Cavan, and then we kind of slipped away from that, like, you know. So we would look back on games where we lost and drew there that really we should have gotten a result out of. And if you all of a sudden you take those 2 wins that we arguably should have got, and the year is even more positive. So we need to just look at it from performances. I think Westmeath in Division 2, being as competitive as we are, is where we need to be. And then as I suppose we start to build, then we can start to look right, or we kind of breaking in on a Division 1 side. And I don't think we're not. I don't think we're a million miles away from that. And I think performance-wise, we're slowly, as I said, being more consistent, which is where a team like Westmeath needs to get to.
Do you like the idea that you've a quick turnaround before getting back together with the panel?
Yeah. For, like, to be honest, I've really enjoyed that we've had something to do over the last few weeks. Like, everyone else is stuck at home, kind of not doing anything. So we've been able to get out 3 times a week to go training, which is great. So the quicker the turnaround for me now, the better. I'd happily get out training now next week if we could. Like, so yeah, I'm more than happy to get back out into it.
And did you find it hard to actually, after losing Saturday night, face into watching football on TV on Sunday, or were you happy to see it? Because what we ended up getting with Cork versus Kerry was unbelievable.
Yeah, no, it was a fairly chilled out Sunday. It was kind of ideal, like, you know, you're sore after a game and you're happily just sitting on the couch with the fire on watching football. Like, so yeah, that Cork Kerry game is, I suppose, as poor as the game might have been, like, to watch because of conditions and whatever else, it couldn't have had a more kind of dynamite finish. Like, it was brilliant.
Yeah, and did you think it was a particularly cynical game? If we just go back to before the thrilling finale, to both normal time and regulation time, or to injury time, it seemed like it was a really cynical game, that Cork weren't going to allow Kerry to just foul them out the field. They were going to do the same thing to interrupt each other's flow.
Yeah, to be honest, look, you do what you have to win, but for the spectator, it was poor. There was, I think I heard there was 45 frees or something in the game. It seemed like any time there was a chance or a snick of a clean flow through the middle, someone pulled a jersey or did something kind of a cynical type of foul. Like, so it was a bit frustrating to watch. But from a Cork point of view, if I was playing for Cork, it was the exact same thing. Like, the last thing you want is Kerry getting up into full flow, like moving the ball quick, slipping it through the hands and stuff, where they're so good and where their skills will just kind of create a gap between teams. So if you can close the game in and make it as dirty and as kind of, I suppose, as much of a fight as possible, absolutely. And I think that's what Cork did, and it fed into the way Cork were playing. Cork were far hungry. They wanted that game a lot more than Kerry did yesterday, and that was clear from the word go, and the style of the game ended up suiting the way they went about it.
Yeah, because, I mean, obviously Kerry aren't a bad team overnight, but they couldn't close out in All-Ireland last year against 14 men for long stages of the game. I'm sure that's still eating away at them. And then to lose this game, and Peter Keane was talking about afterwards, just 13 scores from 30 scoring attempts. I mean, that's pretty bad by anyone's measure.
Yeah, well, I said it once. I said to, I think it was my mum sitting here beside me, and I was like, Kerry are going to win this game here. Like, if you look at the amount of chances they've had in the last 15 minutes compared to Cork weren't creating many chances, but Kerry were so wasteful. And that started from early on. Like, you bring up Egley going through for goal early on, and like, arguably you could say it was a good save, but perfect height for the keeper, pretty much straight at him. Like, does that ball go across to Tony Brosnan, and is it palmed into the net, or does he just put it on the ground? Like, it's a wet night. Like, everyone knows on a wet ground, if you put the ball on the ground, it's just going to slip past the keeper. So, like, you know, were they clinical enough? Like, we had David Clifford, who's like, David Clifford is my favourite player in the country. I think he's the best footballer in the country. I love him, and I think it was so uncharacteristic of him to miss two basic frees. Like, you know, he put them over with his eyes closed on another day. So that lack of kind of, they just weren't clinical enough. And Cork, on the other hand, when Connelly was in, his two frees, his kicking, his scoring, like, that shored up. And I suppose the lack of composure by Kerry is something that would be worrying. Like David Moore, and coming into the dying minutes of the game, you're 2 points up. All you have to do is keep the ball and you're going to win this game. And he balloons two big, massive balls up into the clouds, and Cork go down and rebound and score. And like, literally, that's a mortal sin in football. And you've killed the game. Like, you're in the driving seat. Like, you can actually afford to concede a point and you're still fine. Just hold on to the ball. Like, I don't know why David Moore was trying to spray the ball over the bar from 50 odd yards out, 40 yards out. So then just Cork and Connellan they were just more clinical. They had that bit of class to come in, and Connelly, and he took, was it 2 or 3 great points, and you know, that proved to be the big difference.
When that last ball went in and you saw Mark Keane catching it and knocking it into net for the winner, I mean, I think I was shell shocked for about 3 hours after it. What were you?
Yeah. I was laughing away. I know Mark, and I know his type of character he is. He's a gent. And I just thought it was hilarious that he was the one to do it. The phone just started hopping with all the Aussie boys texting. And obviously, there's Connellan and Mark O'Connor in the same group as Mark Keane, and he's texting. He's like, "Oh, couldn't have done it to a better bunch," and all this crap. So they were all having to go at each other. But no, they couldn't have had a better person in there. Like, you look at the size of him and physically is. Mind you, I would also say that Kerry couldn't have had a better person on him at that moment, and I would imagine that that they look back on that and they'll kind of be thinking that, you know, could Tommy Walsh have done better there? And I'd say absolutely that he'd look back and be quite disappointed in that moment. Like, it's little moments that win games, and like Tommy Walsh is an animal of a man. He's huge, and you'd imagine if he just made some body contact with Keane, he could have been able to hold him out, and all they needed was that ball to break and get cleared out the field, and they were gone. And you know, they didn't handle vital moments of the game very well, and I think that proved to be very costly for them.
I'd also wonder why didn't Shane Ryan come for it? Like, the ball is in the air for 5 seconds. Just hold out your man, and he comes clean to house. There's a bit of blame to you know, give out to different people, but I think the goalkeeper is the one person who can see absolutely everything. So I'd be looking.
I'd imagine that would come from, I suppose, the timing and the position in the game. You're going to be nervous, and you don't want to be the one to make the mistake, and that's what's had to happen there. And you've got a keeper coming out on a night like that when it's been monsoon weather. This ball is coming from the clouds straight down on top of you. I'd imagine that he's just kind of decided to I suppose, leave it to the bigger man beside him, which, you know, you could argue is that the right thing to do as well. But you know, you need guys to stand up and take ownership, and if he comes out for that and gets a fist on it, you know, it's game over. So yeah, as I think Tomas O'Shea said on Sunday game, there is plenty of blame to go around in Kerry, and I think they'll be sore. They'll be very sore after that last night. Yeah.
Do you think it was kind of a perfect storm that led to this? Cork maybe, you know, got some incredible scores. That last goal at the end was somewhat fortunate, somewhat opportunistic. Kerry missed their chances. Paul Ganey, their leader, wasn't available. I don't know, it just felt like everything contributed to Cork shocking them.
Yeah, it did. But you can't take away. I think Cork went about it a lot better. As much as things were going in their favour, they didn't give Kerry a moment's peace. Their intensity in defence, their swarm in defence, and there's a sharp outer there. Like, you spoke about Beanie being a leader for Kerry. Like, I tell you what, for a man of short stature, he was head and shoulders above everybody else in terms of leading his team and driving them on. How many times have we seen him coming bombing forward, and he won that free at the end to ends up leveling the game, and like that's what you need from your leaders and your big players. And I think there was more of those actions and more of those leaders on the Cork side than the Kerry side. And I think when it came down to it, it was a combination maybe of complacency from Kerry in expecting the win, but then also in just doggedness and having a game plan and sticking to it from Cork, and they did it, and they stuck to it right to the end and came off trumps.
Do you expect them to finish the job off against my Tipperary man after this?
I don't know. I think, you know what, I think it's made if Kerry had won, I think that, no offence, I think Kerry would have won. You know, they would have gone on for another Munster. I actually don't know. This has livened up the championship down there. I think your mob showed like from what I saw highlights of that, and they showed us was a bit of magic at the end by Connellan. Like that was one of the points of the year. So I think it'll be interesting to see now how to go about it. Sorry, Sweden. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting now to see how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mayo against Roscommon. Where do you put Mayo in terms of All-Ireland contenders now? And do you expect them to do the job against Galway? Galway haven't had a game since the Dublin League match, and that was on the back of a heavy loss to Mayo in the league.
Yeah, I would expect Mayo. I think Mayo are looking stronger this year than they have in previous years. It's like it feels like they're a bit maybe like rejuvenated or something. They performed very well. Like they blew Galway out of the water in the league, and after 15 minutes, 10 minutes in that game against Roscommon, I thought it was game over. I didn't think Roscommon looked like they were going to compete for the rest of the game especially after that goal went in by O'Connor. So yeah, I'd have Mayo now that Kerry are gone. You know, I think Mayo and Donegal are going to be the other two where you're kind of looking for something to happen. And Mayo this year are probably looking a bit more dangerous than they have recently. Like Paddy Durkin, and these guys are looking pretty strong. His run was just constant the whole way through the game, like coming through the middle of the field from defence. And you know, it's a side of Mayo where they look like they're a bit hungrier, I suppose, even after being relegated in the league. I think they do look like they've kind of, maybe that was a kick up the arse that they needed.
Yeah, and do you think the fact that this was knockout, last year they lost to Roscommon, but there was always the back door. This year, you know, once it's knockout football, are we seeing the real Mayo against Mayo when it matters straight away?
I think so, yeah. I think there's no... Then I think they realise there's no room for complacency or, you know, for taking a game for granted. That obviously with knockout, you just need to go out and get the job done on the day. I think it might suit their style of play. Like they've been in big games before, All-Ireland finals, semi-finals. So I think this might suit them, that, you know, every game is, you know, stand up and be counted, which is I think against Roscommon they certainly did, and they seem to kind of ease through Roscommon, if I'm honest, which is I know a lot of, like, from Athlone, and I've gone to school with a lot of the Roscommon boys and I know them quite well. They'll be very disappointed in how they performed over the weekend. They didn't really seem to have any answers, and they weren't direct enough. They weren't. Mayo, on the other hand, were completely opposite. Every time they got the ball, they were looking to go direct and be quick on the ball, and they were just two very contrasting performances.
Yeah, and are you surprised with how quickly these young Mayo players hit the ground running? Owen McLaughlin at wing back, like, he looks like he's been there for a while. Ryan O'Donoghue was good at centre forward. Tommy Conroy, even Oisin Mullen. Yeah,
no, not really. I think when you go into a good side like Mayo, and it's similar to Dublin, when you're involved in training in a good side, these players that are new to us in terms of, you know, they're only kind of coming into their first championships and stuff like that. But I think they would have been around the squad a lot, so they're at this stage now they're well into a Mayo setup. So I think we're just seeing kind of the fruition of months and months of work. And to us it's new, but for them, you know, they've been involved with the squad now for a while. They're going to be kind of well used to how Mayo want to play, and they've adapted to it extremely well.
You did a piece, as I mentioned, with Frank Roach heading into the weekend there, and was talking about, I suppose, some difficulties you would have had with anxiety. Could you tell us a little bit about that and when it first developed for you?
Yeah, I suppose it came about just when I maybe kind of between 15 and 16, just through different kind of bereavements and losses, and I suppose that age as well, where I suppose it just started to creep into my life, and I didn't really recognise it at first, and then before I knew it, then I was kind of always down in the dumps, basically, I had to put it mildly, and then it just kind of built up, and over the course of maybe 3 or 4 years, then it was just a constant part of my life that I was kind of having to deal with, and it just was something that I've kind of gotten over it. You've learned to live with it, and it was just kind of like maybe 4 years of quite difficult kind of circumstances, but I've kind of got over it and worked through it a lot. Like, it wasn't easy, but kind of came out the far side an awful lot better.
Yeah, and is it one of these things that was dominating your life? I mean, sometimes people talk about having tough time with mental health, and you're wondering, some people you're wondering, was it that big a deal? Was it a huge deal for you? Like, did it dominate your life?
Yeah, it was pretty much every day. It's the first thing. Like, as soon as you wake up, you're just immediately in this weird mood of kind of you're very vacant and irritable. You're very upset about it, kind of everything, and my anxiety would have led to like panic attacks, which would have started quite infrequently and then become quite regular, which was something that I could never really get used to, and they'd be kind of sparked by very minor things, but no, it was very much a constant kind of everyday thing that for a long time no one else knew about. So I felt so kind of secluded from other people. You stop wanting to meet people, and I'm like a pretty social person. Like, and to not want to go and see your friends, then you all of a sudden it compounds everything. So there's a lot of days just spent in my room by myself, which didn't help anything. And then when I went off to college, it was kind of more the same. So I had to drop out of college after about 2 months, not even about a month and a half, 2 months, and it was very much kind of every minute of your day you just feel like you're drowning in something that you don't really understand, and you start to kind of despise yourself a little bit, because you're like, why can't you just cop on, like, just get over it, kind of thing. But it's not really that easy. Like, you need to find ways of what works for you to get over it, and some people never do, and unfortunately that takes the kind of ultimate I suppose decision by them, where kind of suicide and stuff creeps into some people's lives, and they don't see a way out. But luckily for me, whereas those thoughts might have been there before I ever acted on it, I kind of realised what I needed to do to kind of get over it. And I suppose, like, I was kind of lucky from that point of view that I was able to move past it and move on with it. But it's not something that I'm ever going to be fully over. It's not like it's not something I have to deal with it daily anymore at all. I rarely think about it now, but I do have to check in with myself, like, probably more often than others might, just to make sure that kind of like that I'm not going down the same pathway of letting things kind of get on top of me to a point where it will affect me again. So I've got more control over, I suppose, my own head, my own emotions now, which is quite it's quite a satisfying kind of place to be in your life when you're quite content in that, and how you know you're going to kind of behave. Like, and it's a nice feeling, to be honest, coming out of it on the far side, which I'm almost grateful for it, because it's a cliche of kind of everything happens for a reason, but I kind of believe it, because it's helped me an awful lot in terms of who I am, and the way I deal with things now is just so different. So I think it was something that nearly needed to happen to me in life, and it was shit at the time, but it's worked out to be kind of a bit of a blessing in disguise.
When you say you have to check in with yourself to sort of, I don't know, keep on top of things, if there's anyone else who's watching and they're suffering, and what you're describing is something that they're describing, when you say checking in with yourself, what would that mean to them, or what do you think they should do?
I'd say just be quite like self-aware and realise, okay, what is it that is causing this initial kind of anxiety, or obviously if you're depressed, like people who may have had before will know there's like a chemical imbalance kind of in your brain, so you might need to go to a doctor, you might need to get treated properly for it, but others might need to just, as I said, check in, and that might involve just find the reason, find the trigger for the way you're feeling, It might be work, it might be university, it might be a relationship in your life that's gone toxic, whether that be boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever. And once you address the issue and you recognize, okay, this is actually the cause, you can then start to work out solutions to it and the best way to go about it. So for me, that would be making sure that workloads don't get on top of me, and making sure that relationships in my life are all positive. And if you feel that there's a relationship that's toxic, as difficult as it might be, is it better to distance yourself from it? It might be one that you're used to all your life, and it might be one that you think that you can't kind of survive without. But very quickly after removing yourself from a negative situation, your outlook and your positivity can change, and then you'll realize, I should have done this a long time ago. So yeah, that it can change depending on the individual and depending on the issue they have. But I suppose recognizing triggers was a big thing for me, and that's something that I still do now. And I hear people, the number is, particularly for young men, the number of young guys, and as they get older, have difficulty when they're in their 30s and 40s, and they've got families and financial pressure, and they feel like they've got, through male stereotypes, they need to provide for their family, absolutely, and that's just what the male figure does in a household. But then work might not be going well, particularly with the way COVID things are happening. Money isn't coming in, and then all of a sudden you're kind of compounded with issue after issue. So to be able to step back away from that and recognize, right, the issue here now is work. I hate my job, kind of thing, or if that might be it. What can you do about it? Like, can you start looking at other options? Like, no one is forced into doing anything, and I suppose if you can start looking at kind of alternative solutions for issues that you might have, it'll just help you in terms of dealing with your own mental health.
Absolutely. Well, look, I really appreciate you joining me and explaining that, because I'd hope it'll be very helpful to some people. So thanks very much, Ray.
No worries, Shane.